Hello everybody, here's another episode of Storied Sorties with Airconda on Airconda TV Gaming. I'm sorry that it's been a while since I've actually posted one of these. One of the issues I had with this video series is mainly because I'm constantly trying to change and improve on it, and one of the things I decided to do with this model kit that I'm currently working on is actually just build and record and then do the editing after I've built. Unfortunately though, this kit is more complex than the last one. It's not unfortunate, actually. I've had a lot of fun putting this thing together. I just don't have all the time in the world to assemble this tank. Like, kind of spoiler alert, this model kit is actually a tank and not an aircraft. The whole plan of the series is I'm going to go between tanks and aircraft, so the next one will be an aircraft, and after that will be a tank. But anyway, with work and my married life, I haven't really had the time to dedicate to assembling this tank and video editing and recording and all that other good stuff. So I apologize for the delay, but I promise that more videos will be coming out as frequently as possible. So if you're here for the channel for the model kits, you're in luck, because I hopefully will be able to crank one out at least once a week. Fingers crossed, but I'm not going to make any promises. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get into the actual kit we're building today. This one's going to be a Tamiya 135 scale M4 Alpha 3 Echo 8 Easy 8 Sherman tank. The main reason I got this tank in particular as the next model kit to work on in the series is because it was on sale. So I figured, why not? And I wanted a tank, so there we go. We got ourselves our first tank. And from what I understand from model kit builders, is to me is one of the better ones for, like, not the advanced, really expensive model kits, but for, like, I would assume mid-level. I'm not a model kit expert, so don't quote me on that, but it seems like something that somebody that's a beginner probably wouldn't want to start off as. Something that maybe mid to high level would want to do. But again, not an expert, so don't take my word for it. Just I'm just an inexperienced man talking about something he's just getting into. But anyway, in this series we'll go ahead and talk about the history of the M4 series tanks, and some historical famous stories about the Easy 8 in particular. I will also talk about some parts of my history in the military, but obviously since I'm Air Force, I don't have any experience with tanks at all, period, other than seeing them around the area and not really interacting or using them, because that's not my job. And I definitely don't have any history with the M4 Sherman, since that's a World War II to Vietnam era tank. Actually, as I just found out doing research on this tank, it's a lot more in depth than I thought it was, but we'll go ahead and get into that either in this video or in the next video. But before we get too committed to this before I get too far into the video, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the history of the Sherman. As before, I will be posting all websites that I use for reference down below in the description, so if you want to read up on it yourself, because I'm not going to read the entire website, I'm just going to pick and choose different parts of the article and talk about it. But the first one is from sites.mtu.edu. Actually, not entirely sure who owns the site, but I will link it down below in the description. And I will also be using a Wikipedia article about the M4 Sherman. But without wasting any more time, let's go ahead and get into it. The article starts off with the M4 Sherman tank was originally named after the Civil War General William T. Sherman, which they don't get into the history of William T. Sherman. Not in this video, but probably the next or the third video, I'll share some backstory about Sherman. And if I remember correctly, Civil War and World War II are my two favorite periods of history to study. But I am a little rusty on Civil War because it's been a while since I've read up on it. I'm fairly certain William T. Sherman was a Union officer. The article goes on to say that it was replacing the M3 Lee, which, as everybody knows, was the commanding general for the Confederate Army. Actually, I mean, I'm assuming the M3 Lee, but, well, it was named after Robert E. Lee. I'm not 100% positive on that, but I will eventually build one of those kits, and that's when I'll probably find out if it was. And the reason why I bring that up, there was also, I think it was Richard Henry Lee. He was a member of the the Continental Congress, and also had a part in the Declaration of Independence. So he could also be named after him, but I find it highly unlikely. Military tanks is the only tank, tend to be named after generals. If it's named after a person, tend to be. I could be wrong because I don't know everything about tanks. But anyway, the M4 replaced the M3 Lee, and it was first put into service during World War II on September 2nd, 1941, and became the most commonly used tank for the Allies. It was relatively easy to repair, easy to drive, and quick to construct using standardized parts. To put things into perspective, a total number of just under 50,000 M4 Sherman tanks rolled off the assembly line, whereas the Germans only manufactured roughly 1,300 of their famous Tiger tanks. Now, I don't think that's a really fair comparison, because the Germans definitely made a lot more tanks than that. The Tigers, though they're very famous and always talked about in almost every World War II movie, and video game, there's a reference to a Tiger tank. Tiger tanks were pretty sparse. It was mainly like Panzers, as far as I know, that were more commonly used by the Germans. So I'd be curious how many Panzers were created by the Germans in relation to the M4 Shermans. So I would assume their numbers would be a lot closer than 1,300. Now, with that being said, even though the Shermans were highly produced, at least the beginning stages of the Shermans, they were kind of considered paper thin compared to the German tanks, and had issues of being penetrated easily by German rounds. And as far as I understand, we'll find out together as we go through the series, the Shermans were very under armored and armor gunned. The Americans and the Allies just used them to hopefully overwhelm the German numbers by cranking out as many as possible. But again, we'll get into that a little bit more. The article goes on to saying the only tank that rivals the Sherman in sheer numbers was the Soviet T-34, which would make sense. The Russians cut a lot of corners in a lot of their war production, because they weren't so much worried about the survivability of their manpower, but more so worried about, again, overwhelming the enemy. But at the same time, the Russians were on the side of the Germans in the beginning of the war, and eventually Hitler betrayed them and turned against the Soviets, which is Stalin, which led to them obviously fighting each other, enjoying the quote-unquote allies, though they were never really our allies to begin with. Now, the Sherman was used not only, but like the article started off by saying, was not only used by the Americans, but it was used by a lot of other countries. But before I list off the countries, I found something interesting on this Wikipedia article. I was not aware of how in-depth the use of the Sherman was by other nations in different conflicts. So I'm going to actually list off several of the battles or wars that this tank has been used in since the Americans started producing it in 1941. But obviously the first more obvious war was World War II, but after that it was I don't know if these are in chronological order. I'm going to assume they are. I'm just going off the list that Wikipedia has on their sidebar of the article, but it says World War II, it was used in the Indonesian National Revolution, the Greek Civil War, the 1948 Arab-Israel War. I believe obviously it was used on the side of the Israelis. I could be wrong. The Korean War, the Cuban Revolution, Vietnam War, the Revolution Libertador. I'm sorry if I butchered that. The Suez Crisis, the 1958 Lebanon Crisis, the Nicaraguan Revolution, the Indo-Pakistani War of 1965, Six-Day War, that was also with Israel, and I believe it was against Egypt. I'm not positive. It's been a long time since I studied that war. I learned about it in high school, hasn't really read up on it since. The Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, that's why they specified the year in the first one, because it happened again. The Yom Kippur War, the Lebanese Civil War, the Ugandan, Tunisian, and Tanzania War, and the Iran-Iraq War. So so they got a hold of our. This is what happens when America just sells their tanks. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean we sold them, because we had some of our allies use them So they could have easily sold these tanks to these other countries. So we're going to go ahead and get back our list off the countries that were used. And now that doesn't mean they were all of the same variations. As like most things that are sold to other countries, the countries usually take liberties of what they want to do with said tank and modify them accordingly to their own uses and purposes. Maybe because the environment they were fought in wasn't that great, the tank wasn't suited enough for that, or maybe because the enemy they were going up against at the time, the tank was ineffective, so they were trying to adapt it so it'd be more effective in that sense. But the reason why I want to use the M4 Sherman, I've actually, as a kid, always liked the Sherman because obviously it's made by the United States. I'm from America, so I have a personal bias towards American things. And World War II is one of my favorite periods of history, and I've always tend to like the equipment that came from World War II. The modern stuff that have come out recently is kind of cool. It's neat to see, but if you ask me what my favorite vehicles are and favorite aircraft are, they tend to be from the World War II era. So it's part of the reason why I want to start off with the M4. The C-130 was a more modern vehicle. And it is also, I mean, as far as cargo planes, it's my favorite cargo plane. I know it's kind of weird to say you have a favorite cargo plane, but if I troop transport, I mean, C-130 is also a troop transport, and the C-47 is also a troop cargo plane, but the C-47 would be a close second. But anyway, back to the M4 Sherman, because that's what we're talking about. I'm going to list off the countries that use the M4. Those countries were Argentina, Bangladesh, Belgium, which used the M4 Alpha 3 Echo 4. The Brazil used the M4, M4A1, and those were the Shermans they received. Canada, Chile, Cuba, Denmark used the M4 Alpha 3 Echo 4 Sherman, which was supplied by the U.S. So it's a little weird. They specify which variant of the Sherman they used and who supplied. So far, only one country they listed who supplied it. So I'm curious it would be kind of interesting to find out where these other countries like Argentina, Bangladesh, Belgium, and Brazil got their tanks from. I'm going to assume Canada either produced their own, got the plans for the United States, or the United States provided them Shermans and the same. We're going to get, actually didn't list Britain. Fairly certain. Oh, maybe listed as UK or England. We'll continue down the list. Anyway, the next one is Egypt, Ethiopia, Free France, France 7. So they go at Free France and France 755. Not entirely sure what that means. Greece, India, Iran, Israel, Italy from post World War II. Sorry about that. I sneezed. Like I said, Italy from post World War II. That's important to point out because Italy was actually on the side of the Axis powers and not of the Allies. The interesting thing about the Italians, though, again, a little rusty, this could be a little bit off. The Mussolini was on the side of Hitler. The people, for the most part, wanted to be on the Allies. So when we came through with like Patton, through Sicily and up through Italy to liberate or conquer Italy, however you want to look at it, the Italians were generally pretty happy, and I don't know if they joined us in the fight after that, or they mainly focused on securing their own country and rebuilding it after the war, but that'd be something interesting looking at another time. The next country is Indonesia, inherited from the Netherlands. See, this is what I was talking about. Some of these countries didn't necessarily get these tanks from the United States. They got them from other countries. So Indonesia got theirs from the Netherlands. Denmark got theirs by the U.S. And the next one is Japan. Oh, I'm sorry. Indonesia got theirs from the Netherlands following the independence of 1949. Japan also got Shermans, but it was from post-World War II, and it was the EZ-8, the tank that you're looking at now. It was repaired, and it was supplied by the U.S. because we were trying to build a relationship with Japan so they will be your friends and not try to destroy us again. Lebanon, Mexico, Nazi Germany as a Butterpanzer. I probably butchered that. Butenpanzer. It's either Butterpanzer or Beauty Panzer captured. It was a captured vehicle, so that's another thing that you need to understand. A lot of these tanks were passed around because they were captured. Like there's been captured KV2s, captured Panzers, captured Churchills. I think there's even a capture T-34s. I mean, I'm sure if you looked it up, there's captured almost everything. All right, so we go on to the country list. There's a lot of countries they even figured out that use this tank. It was used by the Netherlands, New Zealand, Nicaragua, Pakistan. They received the M4 Alpha 1 Echo 6 Shermans from the USA. Paraguay retired in April of 2018. Holy crap. So the M4 has been in service as long as 2018. I was not aware of that. That's impressive. Which is weird because I'm going to have to scroll back to the top of this article because I'm fairly certain Wikipedia said their time of service was less, unless they're only talking about armed conflicts. Maybe they're not including militaries that may or may not have seen conflict since it's been issued the M4. So then we got Peru, the Philippines, Poland, Portugal. M4 Alpha 3 Echo 4 Sherman was used. That I believe is the jumbo, if not. Which we will be building a jumbo later on. I plan to do a diorama on that. I'm pretty excited about that one. That's probably going to be the next kit I'm going to do after the B-17. And it's going to be an interesting series because I'm actually going to be building 2 tanks for that one and doing like I said, a diorama for. I have something particular in mind, so give you a little sneak peek into the future. People's Republic of China, because we were actually helping China for a bit during World War II. We even had the Flying Tigers who were there before the U.S. officially entered World War II. Pappy Boyington. More about him when we work on the F4U Corsair, or I think it was the P-40s that the Flying Tigers use. I'm not positive, but when I work on either of those aircrafts, I'll tell you more about Pappy Boyington and the Flying Tigers. The F4U is what he used when he was part of the Black Sheep Squadron of the Pacific conflict against Japan. And then we got the Republic of China, South Africa, South Korea, Soviet Union. It has numbers 3,664. I'm assuming that's the number they had. They don't really specify. Sweden, for testing purposes only. Sweden was neutral during World War II, and I think has been essentially neutral during everything. Syria, 1 turretless M4A1 Sherman. Really? I don't know if that credits them as really using a Sherman, but I mean, they had one and it was turretless, but whatever. Uganda, Turkey, 34 delivered in January of 1945. United Kingdom, there we go. They had apparently 17,181 of them. United States, retired in 1957. I believe that was after Vietnam. Through Korea and Vietnam. Yugoslavia, 599, and they had the M4A3E8 Sherman, which again I think is the German jumbo, not positive. Excuse me. And they received theirs during the Infobrio period. Again, I'm not very good. I barely can speak English because I'm just bad at speaking. So I will have these articles in the description so you guys can read them for yourselves and better understand what I'm saying. But the M4 was a U.S. Army Ordnance Department, obviously, designed in 1940. And the manufacturers are the American Locomotive Company, Baldwin Locomotive Works, Detroit Tank Arsenal, Federal Machine and Welder Company. Gonna speed this up. We're actually coming to the end of this video, so I mean the list is long. There's actually several. Ford even was one of the companies that worked on the Sherman. But if you guys want to read up on all the companies, maybe I'll even bring them up in a later article or a later episode. But the link will definitely be down in the description so you can read up on it if you don't want to wait that long, or you can Google it yourself. Everybody has the ability to Google. But I mainly want to talk about the Sherman because, like I said, I think it's actually one of the cooler looking tanks. especially from that time period. It's definitely not the most advanced or effective tank. They're definitely more effective in advanced tanks, at least the early versions. The later models, I don't know all the models that have been out. War Thunder has kind of opened my eyes to that, but I also know War Thunder doesn't have all said art vehicles. So they definitely got more effective as time went on, especially as they had to adapt and overcome against the Germans, who were at one point more superior in their engineering other vehicles, hence the joke about German engineering. It was obviously used by famous generals like Patton and Sherman. I mean, not Sherman, sorry, Bradley, Omar Bradley, which was the second command to Patton. Eventually, he ended up getting his own command. So I'm pretty excited about this tank. I really enjoy this kit. I'm super excited about what to do with it. I've been looking at videos from Night Shift. He's from Ukraine or Russia. Not positive. He's a lot of fun, very helpful, very knowledgeable in kit building. He's been doing it since he's a little kid, so I've been trying to follow him, and I'm excited to paint this thing and put it all together. So if you guys are excited about this as I am, give a like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter and all my social media down below, and I can't wait to see you all in the next video. Thank you for coming on by.